Hi, I'm Mike Wise. I want to show you a new tool that Humber is going to be using to help organize our content this term going forward. It is called Camayak, and it is an online service that lets us organize the stories that we are putting together for things like Humber News at Humber, etc., or some of our magazine projects, or even some of our classrooms. And it's an all-in-one solution, a place to pitch ideas, develop stories, edit them, and eventually get them all ready for publishing. What this does for us is gets around a problem we've had in the past. Say a student is working on a story, they might work it up, write it in Microsoft Word or Google Docs or Apple Pages, and then they email that document to another student who's working as a copy editor. They'll make some changes, they email it back to the student for some revisions. That student makes those revisions, forwards another email with another document over to a student. Perhaps that student shares it with a colleague, approves it, sends it to someone else. What happens is we have version 1 of the document, version 2 of a document, version 3 of a document, emailing back and forth. And it's quite easy for people to lose track of who was reading what document, or if someone is using Google Docs and someone else is on Apple Pages, there might be issues with a format not being read properly. What Camayak does for us is present one online place where we can track everything from the pitching of an idea to creating a space where a writer or contributor can work up a story, add pictures, add content, add online material to that story. When they're ready with it, they can then send it along to be copy edited or fact checked or reviewed by someone else. And at that stage, it can be sent back to the reporter for revisions, back and forth to get the best product possible before it's then sent up for an editor in chief, perhaps, to review, and ultimately a faculty member to sign off on before Camayak can publish it directly to a WordPress site or export the file onto into Adobe InDesign for layout in a newspaper or a magazine project, or we can export it to other projects we might be working on in the future, newsletters, things like that. What Camayak does is keeps everything in one website where we can track those stories, communicate with each other, and prevent that long list of email chains or Slack channels from taking place, and everyone knows where the latest version of the story lives. In these three videos, I want to give you an introduction to what Camayak looks like, how to pitch the story or get an assignment, and then finally, how you take that and you can write up your story and then submit it for approval. This is what Camayak looks like when you log in. There's three main areas to draw your attention to here. You have a series of production queues over here. On the right, you have an activity feed where you can get latest updates on what is happening, particular stories. And of course, along the top, you have a menu bar. I'll go through some of these in detail. First, I want to draw your attention to these production queues. You have a couple of them. There's current, colleague activity, and pitches. Current shows stories that are available for unassigned stories. If you are looking for something to write, you can find some stories that perhaps the editor-in-chief or a copy editor or assignment editor on a story has suggested might be willing to work on as well. This is where you'll also find stories that you're currently working on but haven't yet submitted them for approval yet. Colleague activity shows other stories that are perhaps being worked on. If you have submitted a story and you want to see where it is on the vetting process, you can follow stories along there as well. And pitches is where you can keep track of stories you might have pitched and see where they are in terms of approval. Should point out that I am using an account for a student, fake student I've made up called Testy Testerson, just to show you what things look like from a student's perspective. Another thing to point out here is the activity feed where you can track stories, as I mentioned. I want to draw your attention to the top menu bar here. Number of things here. Home, of course, will take you back there. Calendar is a useful feed. There's nothing on this right now, but this is where the student or a writer, you'll be able to track stories you have been assigned and keep track of any pending deadlines. Could have one of two different types of deadlines with Camayak, a deadline for when you actually have to submit a story for copy editing. Then there'd be a later date after that, which is the deadline for when the story absolutely, finally, positively has to go onto the website or exported for publication on Humber, etc., or into a magazine through InDesign. So you'll want to obey the earlier deadline because it does take some time to vet a script and a story back and forth, and it'll give you a sense of how much time you have to work up the final copy as it goes in for approval. Under new, you can see pitch. We'll come back and talk about that. Recent is a useful tab to keep track of stories you've recently worked on. There is a chat feature built into this, much like a Slack channel. If you are online and other colleagues are online, you can ask them, talk to them about here as well. There's an activity feed where active things, anything that is specifically related to you will show up and set off an alarm there as well. You have settings to adjust your own profile picture, account settings, change your password. And under the Humber News thing, what I want to show you in particular is the desk setup. This shows how the various products we have here are organized in terms of an editorial desk and a hierarchy. You see what I mean when I go down to, we have Advanced Magazine, etc. desk, the news desk. If you were filing a story for Humber News, you would start out as a guest, a contributor, right on the left side there as well. And when you were done, it has to be approved first by a desk editor, then the editor-in-chief, and then finally a faculty member has to sign off on it and approve it before the final work gets sent to the website for publication. Camayak tracks this. Right now, the desk editor is not assigned, but it could be a case where as you're working on a team, you'll know an editor you need to work with. You'll know the editor-in-chief. This is all dynamic and it can change, but it gives you a sense of not only what your deadline is, but who you're working with to revise the copy later on. That's it for the overview. In the next video, I'll show you how you can pitch a story or pick up an assignment to start working on.